So there's been some really interesting sort of series of articles over the last 6 months or so about will AI undermine the act of writing, or teaching of writing for college faculty? Will it undermine the college essay and you can't trust anything students write? Are students going to sort of optimize their way through college by using AI for everything they can possibly use it for, whether or not it's technically allowed in the syllabus? And then there's even been the flip side of students suing their universities because they're saying that the professors have been using AI too much for grading or for doing the types of posts you're mentioning here. I'm curious, when you look at this landscape, I feel like we're in the very early innings of AI. You mentioned ARI is a year and a half old, trying to, in response to this AI era. I'm sort of looking forward to the moment where we start to get past some of these, I think, very early and techno-moral panics, I sort of call them, where it's like, oh, this thing is coming. How is it going to upend our lives and make everything worse and destroy education? But what might that look like? I'm curious, from your perspective, talking within the government as a president of a university, what do you think will be the next chapter of AI that hopefully will sort of turn around some of the fears?
Well, I fear that in the near term, the concerns about AI use are going to be the ones that most educators talk about. Because I do think you should assume any work outside of class is being done by an AI. And that's not only writing, of course, but if you're doing physics and math, the AI solve problem sets at the university level might be intended to take you 6 to 12 hours. It solves it in 30 seconds. And it solves them usually perfectly. And I see a lot of students who I talk to do this. My own son, who's a college student, and I ask him how people are using it, right? And they'll have the problem sets. Ideally, they do them themselves. Minimally, though, they'll have them checked by AI, and then they'll have it checked by a second and third different companies' AI, because in case a mistake is made. And by the time you do that, they're perfect. So I think you should assume any work outside of class is probably going to be AI enabled. And it's important for your listeners to know you really can't detect that. There are programs you can run it through that actually are more accurate than not. It picks up some of the tics or the common phrases, but it has too many false positives to be actually used by administrators. And so you can accuse someone of using AI, but if they deny it, you have to just accept their word for it. So basically, you should assume anything outside of class is done by AI. So what has to happen actually is obviously more in-class work, more writing. Some people at the University of Tulsa are going to oral examinations, like a Viva, kind of an old school kind of thing. Or you use AI for beneficial purposes, right? You can integrate it, okay, you should use AI. And we know you're going to do it, so why not? Let's be open about it. And then you can do some really remarkable things. I mean, I use it, for example, to improve my own writing. I'll often write an essay or something I'm writing, say an opinion piece for a journal or for a public consumption. And I'll have the AI evaluate it. I'm like, what do you think of this? And it's you make a logical leap between paragraph 2 and 3 that you probably should add another paragraph, right, to bridge that. And it actually helps and thinks about it a lot. Not about wordsmithing, but the structure and whether the argument is sound or not. Or, you ask it hey, I'm writing this opinion piece. Rebut it. Imagine you're a deep critic and you disagree with everything in this piece. Right? Write the strongest rebuttal to it you have. And then I read that, oh, that's actually a couple good points. I should think about those, right? And amend my own piece to incorporate it. So there's lots of things you can do. And I'll give you another last example of how I hope it could be used. So this is kind of a personal project of mine. I've studied philosophy a lot in my life. I have a degree in it from my undergraduate days. I occasionally go back to it. And a lot of times, I'll tell myself, I never really understood what Descartes meant. I mean, I knew what he said, and I read it, cogito ergo sum, and we all know this. But why should I care? Why did he care? Why did people fight over these issues for centuries? It obviously mattered, but I never really understood what the stakes were, or who he was addressing. Who were his critics? So I had this little project, and I was actually starting with the medieval era, and so I was talking about the Roman philosopher Boethius, who is still an important medieval thinker, and I was like, okay, we read Boethius. I'm like, why should I care? And I had probably 3 hours of discussion with Claude, which is Anthropic's product, where I would keep asking it questions. And it would say things, even it's smarter than any human is because it's read the entire internet. And so you could ask questions okay, Boethius said this. That seems weird to me. It's debating this substance versus accidents. That seems kind of esoteric. Why should I care? And it's well, in this era, this was a huge debate. And these 5 people really cared, and it defined the entire metaphysics. I'm well, who are these other people? And what was their argument against it? And then it tells you all those kind of things. And like, how did this influence, like what political issues or theological issues did this really matter for? Like, well, the Catholic Church weighed in on this question, and this set the Catholic Church on this like centuries long path. And said, you have this like incredible interrogation of it, where it would say something like line, like, this came from Aristotle. I'm like, well, tell me what Aristotle that is. And tell me what year this was actually translated into Latin from the Arabic, or what was the source of this? How did they find this book? Because it was in the medieval period, most of these texts were lost. That's an example of like, I was a lot smarter about why Boethius mattered.
Right.
As a result of this, even though I've had many classes along the way that discussed him, it was always kind of like, hey, that's a good book, and like very influential, but like, why? Why should I care? And AI used in that way is like an Oxford tutor, but 20x better, like one-on-one instruction from this basically omniscient, but not perfect, but basically omniscient level tutor. It's incredible.
Yeah, I love that example. And I feel like there's an interesting through line that I'm hearing in what you're saying, which is that there's the accountability piece of education. What can you write without AI? You're saying anything you're writing outside of a classroom, maybe you should probably assume that students are using one or more AIs. So you get back to oral exams and blue books and some of the accountability measures we're used to. But that's the baseline of sort of accountability in education. Then there's this other line of, what is the potential here? That motivational piece that you're mentioning, where a student can say, why should I care about this? Why does this matter to me? Why is this relevant to today? Is it only something that was true in, thousands of years ago? Or is that relevant to anything today, or anything in my potential, my life, or anything in my aspirations? And the idea of having sort of the baseline accountability, and we all have to figure that out in the AI era, and people are trying to with some of the methods you just named, but also this second level of how can we take education and give everybody, Oxford tutor that's available all the time, that knows the entire internet, that can explain anything, answer any question in any format, in any language.